Yo, 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 yo. Welcome to another episode of Open for Discussion. I'm your boy, C. Maurice Ball, and I thank you all for tuning in. And y'all know what to do when y'all see the thing down here. Hit subscribe, join our community so you don't miss out on any of the dope conversations that we're going to have spread it throughout this year. So today I am crazy excited. The young lady that I have on here today is amazing and phenomenal. She actually works for the MIB, the Men in Black. So she moves in stealth and she is super, super smart. But more than anything, I guarantee you that she will say that she loves being a mom more than any of the accolades that she has. And today we get to chop it up with her and spend some time with her and hang out for a few minutes. So without further ado, you know what to do. Kick that intro. Oh, I put you in the wrong box. There we go. Let me get you in the right. There we go. Well. I am introducing to some and presenting to others Miss J Rich in the building.
Hey guys, how you doing?
How are you today?
I'm doing great. I got my coffee, so I'm good to go.
Coffee's good. Coffee's good. So without letting everybody know your general location, what side of the United States are you on?
It's all right. I'm actually on the West Coast in Los Angeles, California.
Okay. I just want to be mindful. We don't want nobody, finding you or nothing like that. So I
Yeah.
normally have a crazy story on how I met mostly everybody that come on my show. And this one is not so crazy. We were both in a live with our good friend Donna L, who was amazing, and we were just sitting in there chopping it up. And Donna had asked me to. We were talking about dating and shoes, and the shoes being ran over. And so we just had this conversation, and then it just kind of spun off from there. Then her and I connected, and next thing you know, I was like, "Hey, I need you to be on my podcast," and she was like, "Yeah, you can be on my. I could be on there, but I work in the shadows." And I'm just and so I said, okay, she's Men in Black. And so I said, cool, we ain't got to talk about that. We laughed, we joked, we hung out in some lives. And so here we are. We get a chance to spend some time and really get to know who she is and what she's about. So yeah. Well, thank you for pulling up. I
Well,
appreciate it.
it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
This is going. We're gonna have a great time. We're gonna have a good conversation. Um, so we're in your lineage of family members. Where do you fall at on the scale?
Explain.
Meaning, are you the oldest? Are you the youngest? Are you the
Okay, so in terms of siblings, I'm the youngest. I have an older sister. Uh, my mom only had two kids, so I'm the youngest.
so you the youngest, the baby?
Yeah.
Ah, I know something about the
You wouldn't
babies.
know. You wouldn't know by the way that I act, but yeah.
The baby. How much older is your sister than you?
She's 3 years older than me, but out of both of us, I'm probably the most mature.
And you know, so she 3 years older, and are you are you the favorite?
No, I don't think I'm the favorite. Mm-mm.
You kind of said that with like yes, but I don't want to say it out loud.
No, no, no. Yeah, no. She was the oldest one, so she was the favorite. But no, I pretty much know that I was not the favorite. I wasn't the problem child, but I was not the favorite.
So I'm the youngest of three, and I'm the only boy. So I know what that baby thing. I know it's different for boys anyway. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's way different. It is way different. So you are currently in California.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Now, in your was you born and raised in California?
No, I'm actually from Ohio, from Columbus, Ohio. That's where my
Columbus.
family is, and that's where I started my life. Was up there,
So you know what OH mean.
Ohio, baby.
Come on. Come on.
That's
That's
what's up.
come on. That's what I'm talking about. Oh,
That's good.
for y'all who don't know what that is, I ain't gonna tell you. You just
It's
have
the
to
wonderful state of Ohio, the Ohio State Buckeyes. What you mean? You don't know what
come
that is?
on. You got to know
You gotta
the
know.
national champions 2025 national champions. So I am
Exactly.
a big Buckeye, especially
Yeah.
football fan. Yeah. So you grew
I'm
up
not
in
so much a professional football fan, but Ohio State, yeah, I will watch those games.
so what was I mean like you grew up in Ohio. Did you grow up and stay in Ohio up until you transitioned out?
No, no. I was born and raised there probably until about 12, and then
Okay.
I was accepted into a private boarding school, historical black boarding school, and that school was in Mississippi, and it's called Piney Woods. At the time, it's called Piney Woods Country Life School, but you can look it up online. It's pineywoodsschool.org right now, and it's the last historical black boarding school in the nation. And they taught the head, heart, and hands. We can give you a full background of the school and promo there, right there. But I encourage folks to go in and look at it. They're still in the business of educating young African American students, but you get students from all over the world. So when
Mhm.
I was there, we had students from Africa, from the Caribbean, and all over the United States. So it's like being in college, but you're in high school.
At 12, you went to a boarding school. So that's what, seventh grade? Around seventh
No,
grade?
well, I was going on 13, but I went there for like a summer camp and then, ended up staying there. They tricked me.
So they was like, hey, we
We
got
got
a
this
summer
summer
camp that we
program.
want you to go to and in Mississippi. And then you just end up being there. Like,
And they're
what was
like,
that
you know
like
what, just
even
stay there for 2 more weeks till the school year's gonna start. And I was like, oh, I was supposed to go to Centennial High School because that was a popular school in Columbus. I was supposed to go there. You guys got me down here in Mississippi with cows and
what was
stuff.
like what brought like that's what so that's seventh grade, eighth grade, you
No,
about to turn
no, that was
13,
that was ninth grade for me.
ninth
So
grade. Oh, so you were like a year like advanced. So
well, I
13.
had to start school late because my birthday falls in October. So they
Okay.
hold you back a year if your birthday starts after that time,
Okay.
in calendars. So I had to
Okay.
start later.
Now, up until that point, were you just the average, not average kid, but did you just do kid stuff? You know, did you just
Yeah, I would say I'm a huge Barbie fan.
okay,
So that was a big influence in my childhood. My grandmother, it's a certain status that goes along with Barbie, right?
yeah, it is.
Because they were expensive at the
Mm-hmm,
time.
mm-hmm.
And one thing that she always wanted, because none of her daughters when Barbie came out were younger, but she couldn't afford it. So of her grandkids, all the other girls didn't really want to play with Barbie, and I come along, and of course I'm like, yeah, I'm extra girly. So that was one of the first gifts that she had given me. She was like, one of my grandkids is going to own a Barbie doll, and I have a huge Barbie doll collection that's in storage now. But I have
Okay,
all those dolls from when I was little, so it's a big influence in my life because in Barbie you could be anything. You could be an astronaut, you could be a doctor, you could be whatever, and that was a huge influence as far as me and my outlook on career and balancing all these things out. So yeah,
wow. Barbie had the
I did
influence.
average things. I read a lot and did those types of activities.
So, you said you had an older sister. Where did you have both parents accessible, or did you come from a
uh,
two parent home?
no, no, I did not. So that part of my childhood is a little complicated. My mom was a true child of the 70s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
She was out there doing her thing, and she was a model, and she had a long-standing boyfriend and whatnot, and she had a couple of relationships, but she was young, and as young people do, they will do young things. We were all
Yeah.
young at one time,
Right.
and
Right.
she had my sister at 18 and had me at 21. And so the father situation is a little complex, and it's a funny story. But she was dating one guy, and
Mhm.
for years that's who we thought was my dad, and turns out he wasn't. And so later on in life, we found out that wasn't the case, and my father, now the one I mentioned that passed away, that I mourn to this day, that's the one that my kids know as Grandpa.
Mhm.
He stepped up. He said he had the biggest crush on my mom and everything else like that. He was actually one to take her to the hospital when she went into labor with me.
Mhm.
And so like I said, he passed away, but I knew him from the age of 19 until the day he passed away. So
Okay.
that, for intensive purposes, was my father. He taught me a lot. That's why I said when you called or when you sent that message, all I heard was his voice, like, "Hold on, Pop."
So I sent her a text message about this about being on, and I was way, way, way early. So that's what she's referring to. So I don't want nobody to think anything else. We were talking about the show, and now I do have a question about that though.
Uh-huh. But I
How
want to
important?
clarify that for folks, because I'm sitting there, trying to mosey on my Saturday morning and get me my cup of coffee. And I get this message like, I've been on since 9 o'clock, and it was 9:26. And I'm like, hold on, what you mean? So I called him up, like, what you talking about, Willis? And he's like, oh, yeah, we did say 10 o'clock.
It's a 3 hour difference, y'all. So out in my head, I forgot that we had said 10, and so I sent the text, and
The tone of that text was somebody's papa, like, I told you to be here at this time. And I'm like, that I had to clutch my non-existent pearls. Like, hold on, sir.
who that was that was funny.
Yeah,
That was
I
funny,
chuckled the whole time. From the time I
man.
got the phone with you to the time we sat down here, I was laughing like,
And
man,
that
this
that
man was
was
cussing me out.
funny.
And it wasn't even my fault.
Whew. Boy, that's funny. That's funny. Okay, so you grew up with a pretty much with a single mom. How important do you believe it is to have a positive male in the lives of young people?
I think it's very important, and let's not confuse that you grew up in a single home that you don't have any male influence, right?
Hmm.
'Cause
Hmm.
uncle,
Yeah.
my mother was, probably number what, 8 of 9 kids. So I had, about four uncles there that I was close to, and I had a lot of older cousins, that were, adults by the time I came along.
Hmm.
And then there were community members. At that time, community was still pretty big, and there were still active older men in the community that had a hand in helping out. So I don't want to confuse that with absolutely no one. I just grew up feral and everything else like that without any male influence. But I would say it's very important.
Hmm.
It's important that I would say, especially for young men, but for young women, where they set the standard and tone for your expectations in dealing with men,
Hmm.
right? There were other things, non-positive things that were going on in that sort of dynamic as well. But when you are discussing, that positive influence, hey, this is how you carry yourself as a lady. This is what you don't let a guy do. This is, the expectations that you set. I've had that, throughout my life. So that, I just want to make sure we clarify that there are some that truly grow up without that influence, but
Hmm.
those of us who kind of grew up in the 80s and 90s that actually had that kind of influence in their lives. So I would say it's very important to have men engaged, positive men that are stand up, that shows you, this is how men behave, and this is how they protect, this is how they lead, this is
Mhm.
how they guide, those types of things. So yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, yeah, I don't want to ever, make anybody um, think that, that everybody's situation is the same. It's just, I think that question is just important because when you hear a single parent, it means that there is something that's not in the house. Be it I came from a single dad, so my dad was a single dad in the '80s, and so
Right.
there's a there was some things that I probably missed out on as far as the nurturing, even though he was compassionate and caring and things like that, was probably something that I missed out from my mom not being there consistently that
Hmm.
could have shaped me in a different way or something like that. So I just like I think that question is just important because you know it just is. It just
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Even with that dynamic, if it's a guy in the house, you get taught those same things that I mentioned, but
Hmm.
you have that father daughter relationship,
Right.
um, where you might be daddy's girl. Like I became that later on, right?
Hmm.
So once my dad stepped up and because he didn't know, right? And I couldn't fault him for what he didn't know because he was under assumption she was really adamant that it was the other guy and it was and so once he found out, he stepped up in a big way. I was actually in college when he called me and said, "Hey, um, your sister was the one who actually saw him. She was working at a store called Myers and saw him and his wife there. And she was like, yeah, you need to call my sister because y'all need to have some discussions. And, you know, she's your kid, basically."
Hmm. Hmm.
So I get a phone call. Meanwhile, I'm coming back from class, and my roommate's like, "Yeah, somebody named so and so called you." I had heard his name growing up, but I didn't really pay attention to it. I was like, "Okay, he's the fireman, whatever." I had seen him a couple times, and then so I called him up, and he's like, "Hey, you know who I am?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm your daddy." Okay, what you want?
Wow.
What you want? I'm grown. I'm 19 by then. I'm like, what you trying to do? And
Hmm.
so he was like, "So when you come home, I want to meet you and make sure we have a proper relationship."
That
And he's
so.
like, I'm not one of those kinds of men that let any of their kids, whether they're in my house or out of my house, just kind of go stray. So he set that standard straight off the bat. He said, "You're my kid, and that's that." And so when I finally went home on break, he picked me up and we had just a frank discussion. He was like, "You're really mature for 19," and I was like, "Yeah, I've had to be." But and I told him because he was kind of a little awkward. I says, I need you to understand, I don't blame you for anything that might have happened or you're not stepping up because you didn't know." I
Hmm.
said, "But the thing is, if you suspected, then the onus would have been on you as the adult to confirm, and then a lot of things could have been avoided." I says, "But I don't blame you or hold you for those things because you didn't know." I says, "Now what we can do is move forward from here and cultivate a relationship, and then we can, go from there." And he was just, that's where he said, "You're really mature for 19." So that was the start of our relationship. He took me home to meet his mom, and it was the funniest thing because she was a little old lady. She's a nurse or whatever in Ohio. She had this big old Cadillac and everything else like that. But I walk in the house and she kind of looks me up and down, and she's like, I guess she could be some of ours." I said, "First of all, I wasn't even looking for you as a grandma. I had a grandma who passed away, but thank you for saying that." And then she said, "Oh, yeah, she's definitely one of ours." Because I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say something. You're not going to sit there and insult me in my face and think that that's going to fly over. What are you saying?
That's that Columbus coming
Right.
up.
First of all, let me explain something to you, old woman. And so, she kind of set him straight because she did tell him the same thing I told him. She said, "If you thought that one of mine was out there, she laid into him." And but that tells you his background because he had both parents in the house, and his father passed at a young age, but still he had them in there. And he was sort of the quintessential Boy Scout. He was a fireman. He worked in the community. He was a church going man and everything else like that. The reason why he and my mom didn't work out because she just liked the bad boys. She
Which is
didn't
a
want to
story
get
all in itself, right?
right. She wanted to do whatever,
The
but
roughneck,
he was like he was kind of boring. And I'm like, well, mom.
right? Right. He was and that rings loudly
hmm
because the bad boys have all the fun.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
good guys hardly ever win. That's
Right,
a
and she was a baddie, so to say, and so it's just like okay, I can see, and she definitely had a type.
hmm
I see
hmm
that, I'm like, okay, well, she did her thing, she had her fun, and I said, so how did y'all, she said, well, he said, well, they were friends for a long time, and they, her boyfriend owned the bar, right? So she was always there shooting pool. That's one thing I did inherit from her. And so, he was always trying to flirt with her, trying to get her to kind of come over to the good side to be with the good guy. And I'm like, well, you was trying to be Mr. Steal Your Girl,
the good side.
being a good guy trying to be Mr. Steal Your Girl. So
Yeah.
we've had
Hey,
some good laughs about it, but yeah, that's kind of where it was.
that's funny. That's a great start to a chapter in the book that probably has some things that you have resolved within yourself.
Yeah,
So you go off to boarding school at 13. You bounce to Mississippi
to Mississippi
by
for
yourself.
4.5 years to Mississippi.
So so boarding school is just like all year round college, right?
Well, it's not year round. Of course, you get breaks,
Okay.
Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, and summer break or whatnot. So most of us would go home. So I would go home in the summertime and things like that. But like I said, it's just like being in college, but you're in high school. So we had dorm parents, so we had, several dorms, and I was sort of in the honors dorm. And, it was just a bunch of girls, and it was a co ed school.
hmm
So the girls were on one side of campus, so across the lake was the boys,
Right.
and they would have these little things called ninja runs.
Yeah. Yeah. We got
Yeah.
to.
You dressed
Yeah.
in black, you go running through the woods, meet your
Right.
boyfriend, whatever else.
Yeah.
I never participated, thank God, but I had the key. So I was
hmm
let's just say I capitalized on my access to
Oh,
buildings and charged folks, hey, you want me to leave this door open so you can meet your person? Okay, that's gonna be $20.
so you was a hustler.
Hey, Ohio thing.
Well,
Ohio
now,
place.
how did you end up in a board? Like, were you that advanced in school? Like, how did that come up? Like, out of all the options that was available, how did boarding school in Mississippi become an option?
So
Like,
so
what?
that right there, they actually did a segment in the 80s on 60 Minutes. And so where they went to the school, they displayed and everything else like that. The second president of the school was from Ohio.
Mm,
And his goal was to send a student there, full paid scholarship that would succeed. And so I was a part of a organization called Sacred Sisters and Brothers. They were founded by a group of women who were a part of Delta Sigma Theta. And so that influence has always been there since I was about 8 years old. And so they would come into sort of the urban areas, inner city,
mhm.
and work with kids that were, economically disadvantaged, and show them something different culturally. And so early on in my young life, exposure to African culture, exposure to African history. I met Dr. Maya Angelou when I was a child, through this organization and the different activities that we did. And so they had us to write an essay.
Mhm.
And, I think one of the things that stands out, and they still kept it to this day, I don't know, whatever, but I said, I have too much promise, and I don't want to be a statistic. And some other things I said in there. And, I guess that stood out to them. And so I remember sitting in a room, they kind of, showed me the film and they were like, this is Dr. Um, so-and-so here and, Dr. Wade. And so we want to, have a talk with you about what you said and what your plans are. And so, that was kind of how I came to the school. They selected me to go there. They was like, you can go for the summer. You can just go for the summer, see how you like it. They lied to me, y'all. They lied to me. Because again, I had my mindset. I'm gonna go to Centennial High School. It was a popular high school. That's where, '90s, everyone was going there, and it was just the coolest school, right? And so, but yeah, I was a pretty good student. I would try, but not try. So it was, I get an A if I wanted to, but I didn't want to come across as too smart. So, and so that was how I came across the school. Came there for the summer, had a good time at the summer camp. But by the end of the summer camp, I was like, okay, I'm ready to come home. School's about to start. School's about to start, and they were like, yeah, how about you just stay? And my feelings were so hurt. I think I cried for about a whole month because I'm like, y'all got me down here in the country. It's
in Mississippi.
In Mississippi, it's hot, and it's a bunch of trees around here. I think my ancestors might have hung from.
Oh man.
But it was a great experience.
So you. I mean, that's a major shift that
going from inner city to the country.
Yeah, that in itself is a transition, but the also just the environment of the school. So, but it also has some benefits. But you in boarding school, so I mean, it's just like being in any other school. So I'm pretty sure there were stuff going on that like any other school, but you were an academic. How you just said something. You said you didn't want to seem too smart. Do you think that's an issue with do you think that's an issue that kids downplay how smart they are so they can fit in?
Oh, certainly. You know, again, in the 80s, 90s, that time frame where we grew up, you had all this boom of Black culture, Black experience, and everything else like that. And so people wanted to come across, whereas you look at before, I'm going to stop right there. You know, the onus was on Black excellence through education, through, stewardship and things of that nature. And so that was sort of from the time of Reconstruction up till, the 90s, 70s and 80s and 90s, that was pushed that, hey, you got to get education, you got to get this, right, and so on and so forth. And so by then it was, it wasn't cool to be a nerd, it wasn't cool to be too smart. And so those types of things. And so I didn't want to come across as that, but I still came across as that because of the way I carry myself. That was one thing my grandmother instilled in me. You carry yourself as a lady. And so I always stood out sort of like a sore thumb, even like I've never learned how to double dutch.
Okay.
Right.
We listen and we don't judge.
Right. No, I'm just saying I still have trouble, French braiding and things like that. So it's some things like that. Listen, my daughter got through childhood. Her hair was always done. That's all I'll say.
Do you know how to play spades?
I do not, but I know how to play pool. So I still maintain some of my black card there. But my mom was a pool shark. She was a card shark and everything else like that. She knew, but that was the distinction there.
Can you dance?
All the kids could do what they wanted to do. When I wanted to go out and play double dutch, no, Jay, you're going to go to the library.
Yeah.
And even, I talk about this often when the crack pandemic came into the neighborhoods and started flooding there. And I said, there is honor amongst thieves. I said, because a lot of those guys that were on the block, they made sure I made it to that library and back home safely. And if guys are trying to talk to me, no, you leave her alone. She's going somewhere. She's getting out of here. So even they sort of recognize that quality about me that, they provided protection. And years later, I caught up with a couple of them after they had gotten out of jail. And they was like, Jay, we see you online. We're so proud of you, And so that means a lot to know that, again, those men, those young boys were protecting and providing that, buffer there for some girls to, hey, this one's you don't play with. There's some that's for play,
Right.
and there's some
Right.
that whatever else. I never quite understood that, and maybe we can talk about that later on. But um, that's just kind of how that was. That
You
they provide.
know, they see it. I mean, I came out of a neighborhood like similar to that neighborhood, and because they see that you have the potential to make it out,
Hmm.
they make sure that you don't get caught up in the foolishness because you have the potential to make it out.
Exactly, and that's what happened.
Yeah, it's crazy how that you look and see like you in the environment, and somebody sees something in you that says, "Hey, you cannot be in this with us because
Right,
we want somebody to
somebody to
be
get out.
somebody to get out," and
And
that's
but each one teach one, and it takes a village.
yeah,
And so I hold that true in my heart to this day. And that's one thing that's also you as they said, you can't promote everybody, but
right.
those that we know are going to give back. And so I've spent the better part of my career making sure that I could give back, could return that favor to those that provided that to me, that opportunity.
So you skating along through boarding school, and life is good. What was one of the biggest challenges that you faced in boarding school? Was there colorism? Was there? I mean, because if it's an all black
It's all black.
school, so but was there? Okay, you're light skinned and you're over here. What's the dynamic?
You doing
Like
the
what's
school days thing, good and black,
yeah
good
the
hair.
school?
We actually
Yeah.
did a skit on that as an icebreaker, good and bad hair, and so we kind of made fun of that because we didn't give any quarter to the light skinned students or preference. You on this campus with us, we all equal here. I went to
Okay.
school with actually with Benny Thompson's daughter. He's a senator in Mississippi. So when I say kids came from all walks of life, Kathy Hughes is the daughter of a granddaughter of the founder of the school. She's a huge radio presence in Washington D.C. area, and so we had folks from all over the place, from Africa and everywhere else, and it was just a great equalizer to be on that campus. And so the challenge for me was learning. That's where you kind of learn
Hmm.
to let go of being home, let go of that influence because that's not where you're going. That's not the path you're on. And so I learned, even before then, but that was the sort of the second phase of the lesson learning of letting go of family, letting go of that part of life that I had grown up with, that security, and stepping out onto your own. And so that's where a lot of my cousins that are now, they're in their 40s and 50s, they're just now leaving, and they couldn't understand how it was that, Jay, how are you able to navigate this world like this? Because I've been doing this since I was 13. So I got
Yeah.
a head start on you guys to be able to kind of let that go. Whereas they're constantly drawn back to it. So even if they left, my sister left several years ago. She stayed gone for 2 years and she went back. And that's kind of what happens too. People go back because that's what's comfortable. That's what they're familiar with. Whereas I'm used to being out there traveling around doing what I do, and often alone. So yeah, that was the biggest lesson.
Was there a big adjustment that you had to make, like when you went back to the crib and you trying to hang out, and you just what was your perspective then? You're here and you're around all these different gumbo of black people. Then you go back to Columbus, and then you start to see. Did it cause you to see where you came from different?
Um, in any situation, even if you're going off to college, you look at things a little different, right?
Hmm.
You see the things that aren't right. When you're in the thick of things, you don't realize it's wrong when you're in a petri dish.
Hmm.
But when you're taken out of it and you kind of look back and you see that was a whole lot of wrong. That ain't quite not that ain't but you're so focused in your microcosm, in your
Hmm.
ghetto, in your hood, you don't see that this is not quite right here. This is dangerous, or this is adverse to the economy in this neighborhood. You don't see it. But when you step out of it and you're looking, and so I got to the point where I was telling my cousins, hey, join this and do this and see something different. even when I was a kid going to the library, they're like, "Oh, that's boring, Jay. We don't want to do that." So even then, I had seen it that
Mhm.
there's more to it. Books gave me an avenue to see the rest of the world. That was my early exposure to external influences. And so then to step out of it and see, oh, there's more to this than that. It's the same thing for folks that live in the United States. They've never left the country, so they don't know
Right.
about the rest of the world, and they don't know that actually this is not the best country. In a lot of ways, we're not the
Right.
most advanced because there are other countries that have more.
Right.
And until you leave that, you won't get that exposure, and that's where folks get really, really stuck in a lot of their beliefs and how they move and how they act and how they live. So yes, going back home and seeing that, it was just like, poor things. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah, one of the harder things about that too is you get that even though Columbus is not a small town per se, you
Oh,
still
it's
get you still get the the small town mentality, right? Like you got people that have never left the confine, anywhere outside of that place, and what they see is all that they believe that there is.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And then you go somewhere else and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you come back and it's like, yeah, I know it's a whole nother world outside this little outside the
mm-hmm.
block that we live on.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think that's one of I had gotten exposure early on too. So it was one of those things where my dad gave me the freedom to get outside of Indianapolis
Mm-hmm.
and go see some things. And so I was really not locked, even though Indy's the city, I was never really locked into it like that. Like, nah,
Right.
there's a whole big old world out here. And so, but at 13, you were shipped off to boarding school, and then life just changed. And so,
The whole thing changed. The whole set. Yeah.
yeah, that changed. I mean, because now your foundation is built on um, exposure. That's the like you were exposed to things that some people
Most
didn't get to
adults
the as
haven't been.
adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's and then it's kind of hard to kind of go back in and try to fit in and have conversations because you talking different, and the things that they're talking about, which is normal to them in that space, you're like, nah, we not talking about that where I'm at.
You're
Like,
thinking too small, son.
yeah,
You're too
like yeah, nah,
small. I need you to think bigger picture. And I
yeah,
find even as an adult now, I still have that experience in a lot of ways where I'm, for instance, going through social media and being on TikTok, and I'm seeing people in these different lives and having these discussions, and I'm
mhm,
thinking, yeah, thinking too small, man. You're thinking too small.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just imagine the things you've done seen and done, and I know we talked a little bit offline a little bit about some of that, but so you graduate you graduated at 18, 17? You graduated at
I
17,
graduated at 18.
18?
And so back in '97.
You said that like you like that's old,
Oh, really?
97. You know what I was doing in 97?
It didn't seem like it was that. It's like, man, hold on, my son is
Shoot, 97. I was already. I can't even tell you what that stuff is
what you
redacted.
was doing. You was in them streets.
I was deep in them streets. We was at Freaknik in '93, so by '97, I was.
Yeah, we snuck off to that too.
So you was at Freaknik
I
as
went
a
to,
high
I
schooler.
think they had one in 90, 95, 96, whatever.
'95, yeah, that's kind of when it
Mhm.
started the transition.
Mhm.
It started to
Go down.
kind of yeah, it started to go down and they started to move it. They started to isolate it
Hmm.
to a certain part. But when we was there in '93,
Hmm.
Atlanta was Freaknik. That there
That's
was
it.
no place that you could not go that Freaknik didn't touch in
Hmm.
'93. And so I tell people, hey, if you see the Freaknik video and the movie, and
See
you
me
happen
in
to see,
there.
if you see me in it, whatever I was doing in that video, I did it because
Right. We
everything I was
don't
doing
talk about that.
was legal. So I am not ashamed. I had mad fun. It was probably the best
Oh, did
time.
I see you dancing on top of that
You
car?
probably did see me dancing on
Working.
top of the car. Oh, yeah, oh 85. And you probably
Right.
did. Yeah, that was me. I was out
Uh-huh.
there wilding, having mad fun.
Yeah.
So you graduate at 18. What were your options out of high school? So was college automatically set up because of the structure that you were in? Was college like not an option? Was that the next natural progression?
That was the next step, right? So I had a couple of options in which I was, debating going to the Air Force. And in my mind, I had it to set where I wanted to major in become a MD, OBGYN. But I wanted to be the first Black combat aviator.
Mhm.
However, my eyesight was terrible at the time. And so, and yes, I scored high on the ASVAB and everything else like that. And so I could have immediately gone into, being an officer and everything else like that. But what happened is my senior year, the government came in and said, hey, we got some scholarships. And this was across the country at the time where
Mhm.
they were actually doing good things in the government. Where they said, we're taking kids from across the country, whether you're in Appalachia, rural America, whatever else, and we want to give you an opportunity to work for the government because they were trying to fill the bench because you had an aging workforce.
Mhm.
And so they came and offered two of us. They said, we got two scholarships. And any seniors that want to come and interview for it, you can. Well, only two of us showed up.
Wow.
Because everyone else, because the requirement is that you have to major in certain things. You have to
Okay.
major in something with, for instance, biology, sort of environmental type of sciences or engineering or something along those lines you had to major in. Well, a
Mhm.
lot of the students didn't want to major in those things. And, I'm a lover of history and other things, but at the time they just had forestry on the list. They didn't have anthropology on there. And so I thought, okay, I like trees enough, but I really don't like trees that much to do it as a career. But I started my major in forestry. And so once we established that and I was accepted for the scholarship, they did a whole news article and everything else like that. I went to Alabama A&M. So the next progression for all of us there was either you go to college, you go to the military, or you go to a trade school. That
Mm.
was your or
Okay.
community college. And
Mhm.
so that's how they ensured successful outcomes for their students. And so I went to Alabama A&M for a semester. I did the major thing, and I was just like, yeah, I don't really like trees that much. I really don't care about the different types of leaves on these. I can name them, but I really don't care.
Mhm.
They just help us breathe. Thank you. And at the time, I had met my kid's father my senior year, and he was still in Mississippi, and I was in Alabama, and so I wanted to be young, dumb, and stupid. I wanted to be closer to him, and so I changed school from Alabama A&M, and I went to Mississippi State, and to be closer, but it was still a couple hours away. And I changed my major because I was like, okay, what else can I do? Well,
Mhm.
anthropology was a major there. You can't major in archaeology in the United States, at least at that time. And so it has to be under that broad umbrella of social sciences and anthropology. So that's kind of what I got into. They had an institution there, Cobb Institute of Archaeology, and so I was the first Black female student to graduate under that particular college.
Wow.
And so to this day, they'll sit there and write me, letters and things like that, and ask about my experience in that field. But so yeah, so trailblazing at an early age, being the first to do a couple of different things has been sort of my mo.
And you still writing that story. I mean, like I know coming out, just hearing where you came from, being the first to kind of break away, being the first to were you the first college graduate out of your family?
Um, I think so. I think, come to think of it, yeah, I think I might have been from a 4-year college. Yes,
Okay.
not from like a 2-year, type of thing, but yeah, from a 4-year college. Yeah,
Okay. So you meet this guy that swept you off your feet at this young age.
yeah.
Was he an athlete?
In high school, he was. So he was
Okay.
about 7 years older than me. And,
Okay.
and so he wasn't in college at the time, but, you get wrapped up and caught up in stuff, and you don't really know what you know. And we had started a sort of whirlwind sort of thing,
Hmm.
and like I said, it propelled me to change schools to be closer, to try to whatever else, and see how that worked out. And in my heart, I was like, yeah, I'm not destined to stay in Mississippi, but since he's here, I'll go ahead and whatever else. That's the story that we tell ourselves when we're trying to make accommodations for someone that probably shouldn't be making accommodations for. And yeah, so I met him. Probably about 2 years later, I had my son, and so I was a sophomore in college at the time. The fear in a lot of my family was that, oh, she's going to drop out, and I'm like, drop out for what? I got a full ride scholarship. I still got to go to school. So I had him like in June, and I went to school in August, and so we kept that going. He was on the campus with me. He was in classes with me. He was such a good baby. And so, that was the thing. That made me more determined, because I was already going to succeed one way or the other. But when he came along, it put everything into sharp focus for me. Like, you know what?
Hmm.
I got to feed this little thing that's sitting here looking at me with these big old eyes. Like, what are we going to do? And
Right.
so, that was the thing that pushed me further. So every summer, part of that scholarship program was that I had to go to some place in the country to work, to get internship experience. And
Hmm.
so, I've gone to several places. He stayed with his dad, during the summer times. And I would just go, for the last 2 years of that schooling, to Nevada, to Utah, to other places to do archaeological work.
Hmm.
And, it was a challenge, to let go of my baby and leave him there with his dad, who by then we were having significant relationship issues. And, but I had to kind of put my trust that he wasn't going to do anything to his son, right? Or put him in any danger. But I'm sitting there like, I don't trust you because you put me in danger by the things that you were doing. But okay, I got to separate the two, right? That's
Right.
the level of
Right.
maturity, letting go,
Right.
right? That's what a lot of
Right.
folks that are in the situation similar to that. You find a lot of guys, and I will always be an advocate for guys being involved with their kids' lives.
Hmm.
And so, but a lot of times women will keep them from their kids out of spite, out of whatever. But I had to kind of let that go, because I'm like, I have to realize this is bigger than me and him.
Hmm.
This is a career opportunity for me to provide a better life for our son. And whether we're together or not, it's just setting us up for success. And so I had to trust that he was going to take care of the son, so that by the time the summertime ended, I came back for him, he was going to be alive and well and have all his fingers and toes. So that was a thing. But again, it helped that he was also older, because he had a job or whatnot,
Hmm.
and he was doing, he had his own place. So I was comforted in that, versus him just kind of crashing at other women's houses and doing those types of things. So we were able to kind of co-parent effectively. By the
Hmm.
time I graduated, we weren't really together like that, but he came to my graduation, and things of that nature. So we were able to kind of come to an understanding. I never put him on child support, but he paid child support. So that took some time to work through, and
That's
it wasn't
maturity too.
easy. Huh?
I said that's maturity too.
This maturity, right? So all those things are in the place. So that's kind of where things started with him.
Now, and at the same time, that's around that time is when you started to get back into relationship with your dad.
So I had already been in sort of relationship with my dad. So
Okay.
he was the one who
Okay.
was like, put him on child support.
Oh, okay. He
Forget
was
that
pushing the
dude.
envelope.
Put him on child support. Do this. And so he and I had my dad and I had talks about that too, because he was like, he didn't like my kid's dad. He did
Okay.
not. He said that is not the person for you. He called it early. And that kind of offended my kid's dad, because he was like, he don't know me. Well, actually, it turned out he was right. So, huh. but
Now,
hindsight,
did you listen to your? Yeah, obviously you didn't. But
I didn't.
when your
Uh,
dad was telling you this information, um, what was going on in your head?
we all go through that. Oh, they don't understand us. It's us against the world, Bonnie and Clyde type of thing. So you're
Right.
young, right? You're like,
Right.
no, this is. Was it? A singer said, I love my girl. I'll never let her go. Whatever, that type of deal. So you
Right.
have that in your head, like, oh, everybody's against us and da da da. We're supposed to be together.
It's
So
funny.
again, young, you're thinking that you're in the thick of it. And I think we've all been there where we're like,
Yeah.
if people are telling you, no, that's not the one for you, Maurice. That she ain't no good for you, or JJ, that's not the one for you. And
My
so,
dad told me, my dad
but
told me that. Am I coming through clear? Is this, am I
yeah,
coming through? Okay. Um, yeah. My dad told me that. And I did the same thing that everybody else did. You don't know.
right. You don't understand.
He was like, she gonna break your heart.
Mhm.
He was like, she gonna break your heart. And I'm like, no, she ain't. I love her. Man,
Or a
yeah.
heartbreak hotel.
Had me all in a whole nother. I had to go to Ohio to try to recover. You know what I'm saying? Had me all messed up. So,
Yeah.
but at least you had that structure and that foundation. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's a to hear your dad start to at least give you some input. It means a lot. And
Mhm.
hindsight is always 2020. And so you're at the same time you're working this relationship, you're establishing a relationship with your dad, you're still trying to figure out who you are. What was that like trying to put all these pieces together? You're still probably, you talking to your mom and she's probably feeling some kind of way that you got pregnant, and your grandma, like the responsibility that you had because you were breaking out and you were doing all these different things. How much pressure was that on you to try to still figure out who Jay was in that whole process?
I would say it was a lot of pressure, and it was a challenge because I was away from my family.
Hmm.
All right, it'd be different if I was in Ohio and they were there and direct influence in it, but I was in another state. So my mom felt some way about it because she couldn't be there to protect her baby,
Hmm.
right? And so she kind of reserved judgment. She got along with them just to get along with them. She really didn't like them either. But she realized, okay, this is the father of my grandbaby. This is the first boy in my family unit, and she absolutely adored her grandson. And so, but for me, it was just a matter of I didn't think of any other way. I had to do it. I had to succeed. That was the end goal. That was the light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm.
So when you have that kind of focus and drive, um, all the other stuff falls away.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it didn't impact me, right? Because there were the normal relationship type of things that were going on. There was the schooling. I had to maintain a certain GPA to keep that scholarship. I had a
Mhm.
baby here that I had to make sure it was fed and had daycare and things of that nature. So I had to kind of juggle all these things. And I just remember thinking at one point in time, like, I don't know how I'm doing this. But I was just blessed enough, and I stayed prayerful enough to where I'm just like, it's going to work out one way or the other. And I still have that mentality. No matter
Mhm.
what's coming my way, it's going to work out in the end the way it needs to. And so having those things kind of just fall into place, it helped that I had a scholarship. It helped that I had an immediate job once I graduated. Um, all those things were set up for me to where it was really easy to kind of transition to a lot of things. Whereas someone else, my other peers who might have been in a similar situation, they didn't have that sort of foundational setup for
Yeah.
school to career to whatever else. So a lot of those struggles I didn't really deal with. Like my thing was in college, I was determined not to be on welfare. So I will never be in the system,
Hmm.
never to have my son in the system, and I never did. You know, so
That
fortunately, I
motivation
got through it.
is big, especially when you see it. You know what I mean? Like you got out of it and went back and seen it. So you've seen something that you didn't want to become. So that just
Mhm.
extra motivation to say, nah, I don't want to, I'm not coming back here like that.
Yeah, I ain't about that life.
Yeah, that nah, we got something else that we doing. Okay, so he was 7 years older than you. You have your son, you're rocking it out. You were figuring out how to move these pieces on the board. You're starting to establish a solid relationship with your dad. And do you have a great relationship with your mom?
My mom has passed.
Did
Um,
you have
and
a great
so,
relationship with your
so
mom?
that was a complex thing too.
Okay.
And so, a lot of this will be outlined in the book, but, when you say, were you the favorite? I knew I wasn't because, my origin story, if you will,
Hmm.
even though that, my dad is the guy that I recognize as my dad, he's not my biological father. Okay.
Okay.
And so, and I'll just say, I am a product of rape. And so that sets the tone for relationship between mother and child when you had that type of trauma there.
Right.
And
Right.
so when you work through that in your early childhood, you kind of wonder, why is she gravitating towards my sister more and not me? Because I stayed with my aunt and my grandmother a
Hmm.
good bit of my childhood growing up. So there was probably a handful of years where I actually lived with my mother. And so, like I said, we had a complex relationship. Towards the end, we were really kind of focused in on cultivating that because she recognized that, a lot of her internal trauma she had tried to pass down on me. And I can remember a conversation with my
Mm.
grandmother and my aunt telling her, well, Jill, you can't do that to her. She doesn't understand. She's just a baby. You can't separate her out from, whatever else. And so, but I did spend a lot of time, and me and my aunt, we are really close. And so, and even with my grandmother, those were the first two sort of people that I remember in my early childhood.
Hmm.
For a long time, I didn't realize my mom was my mom. So I just thought, well, okay, whatever. But, once I moved in with her and, that was quickly corrected, and it was just like, oh, okay, this is mom.
Okay.
But you kind of feel the difference there where she's trying to feel how to be accepting of this child who looks like her but is not what she was looking for, and trying not to do certain things. And it was a little complex growing up, but and I told her, I said, I never held that against you because I didn't know the full breadth of things even until when she passed.
Hmm.
And so when things came out, it was just like, oh, that explains a lot. My aunt kind of, finally kind of confessed some things, and I was just like, okay. And she said, but she loved you and everything else like that. And I don't doubt that my mother didn't love me. It was just hard for her to express it. And this is where I'll always be sort of an advocate for, choice. Because it does have an impact on whether or not a mother can be an effective mother to that child or not.
I
And
agree.
to force women to carry that burden, that's a trauma in and of itself.
I
So
I
so
agree.
yeah, in that instance, like I said, we were working on it. We had a lot of things in common as far as my style that you mentioned before. That's all my mom. That's her influence. How I carry myself, that's my grandmother's influence.
Mhm.
My demeanor, that's my aunt's influence. So all those types of things, kind of coalesce into who I am today. So yeah, but I love my mom to death. I still mourn her. It's only been 2 years since her passing. So her and my dad passed 6 months apart in the same year in 2022. So
Oh
that
my.
was a challenge right there too.
Yeah, I bet that was kind of tough. And this is one of those things. Growing up as kids, we don't know. We only know what we know. We don't know nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we don't have no idea or no clue as to what is going on
Behind
um,
the scenes, yeah.
behind the scenes. Yeah, and so when I hear, I mean, like the stories are some of somewhat the same in some pieces of it.
Mhm.
But we grew up in an era too where kids didn't get in grown folks'
And
business.
grown folks, right? You stay in a child's place.
Yeah, you don't talk when you come in here. You ain't it's different now. Like I look at my son, and he could be in conversations and be in the room with me with my homeboys now. But
Mm.
even when he was younger, I wouldn't like let him come in.
Hmm.
If he started coming and talking, it was like, no, you're a kid. You stay in kid place. But
Hmm. My
the, you
kids to
know,
this day will leave the room if I'm hanging out with my friends. They'll leave.
Yeah, he will too. Like he will kind of just bypass, but he
Mhm,
could sit in the room with us,
mhm,
if he wanted to. Um, you start putting all these pieces together, then you figure out, like, as a parent who just became a parent, who looking for an example on how to parent, how
mhm.
difficult was it for you to now to figure out how to be this mother that you didn't have the example of? Oh, but you had your grandmother and you had your auntie, so you pulled from other references.
I pulled from other references, but I also knew that, what I didn't want for my kids. There were a
Hmm.
lot of things I saw growing up that would be downright tragic for folks to if I go into detail about it. So I knew that, whenever I had kids, I promised myself that after, some events that happened, if I ever have kids, they will never have to go through this. They will never see this. They will
Hmm.
never live this kind of life. And so coming out of that, when I had my son and I'm looking at him, and I'll just tell this story too. My mom did get caught up in sort of the crack pandemic.
Hmm. Hmm.
And one thing I told her when I had him, she called me as I was in the hospital having him. And I says, "You will never see him. You will never know him. You will never meet him. Nothing unless you get cleaned up." She checked herself into rehab that night and was clean ever since. Um, because she knew the brevity of it too. I think it
Hmm.
finally hit her like, oh, I need to, do something different. And so setting those boundaries was important for me. And, whereas you find a lot of kids, you see that grandma's taking care of the kids, and it's
Hmm.
still, prevalent in the Black community. And,
Absolutely.
or aunties or someone else is taking care of the kids while mom is, still whatever. And I said, I will never send my kids off to anywhere. So even though I was in college, like their father's sister said, well, I'll take the baby while you finish college and you can live your life and da da da. And I'm like, what kind of mom you think I am? Oh,
Right.
you got me mixed up, first of all. And two, we ain't
Right.
from Mississippi. Even though he was born here, he ain't from Mississippi either. We don't have that mentality.
Right. We
So,
move different.
so right. And so I said, no, that's never gonna happen. He has been with me like every day of his life, him and his sister, like, yeah, all we know is mom. And and they'll say this to this day, she was an amazing mom. And I don't say that to toot my own horn, but yeah, I'll say I was a damn good mom. And it's because of those childhood things that I wanted to be there for them. Every
Mhm.
game they had, whatever else was going on, I'm there in the front row cheering and screaming and hollering, because I knew that that's what I needed growing up.
Mhm.
And so I was determined to sort of break that chain, break that curse for my kids. And so that's
Yeah.
just kind of happened.
That's yes. you know, that yeah, I just all of that you're talking about is all prevalent. Like
Hmm.
my dad was an amazing dad, so I just follow suit. And one of the things that I've learned growing up, just kind of just putting some pieces together, was my mom didn't love me the way that I wanted her to.
Hmm.
She loved me the best way she knew how to.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and at some point I had to figure that out, but I was like way mad old by the time I put those pieces together. Um,
Right. You
so
got to provide them grace because they
yeah,
were young too, right?
yeah,
Going
yeah.
through these things, and they didn't have the guidance that was there. Even though my grandmother was an amazing grandmother to me, she was one of the first Black hospice nurses in Ohio.
Hmm.
That was her focus. She was a wife,
Hmm.
but she had 9 kids, whatever. She was the only child, right? And so she wanted to have more kids, and she was married, and so you start to see different things that have come about. So it doesn't matter whether you have 2-parent household, a single parent household, or whatever else. It's the environment that you grew up in,
For
and what
sure,
you do and how you cultivate that. That really makes or breaks the factor of whether that child is successful.
for
And
sure.
so seeing that dynamic there and the choices that were made, we also have to give them grace for their mistakes. So she was focused on that. So she lost sight of some of what her kids were doing, but it allowed her to kind of then become a better grandmother. Same thing with my mother.
Hmm.
She made her mistakes young, but then she could become a good grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you have those breaks and generational type of things happening, where you might be messing up totally, but then as you grow and mature, you can be something better. You can redeem yourself, so to say. And I think that's what a lot of folks are doing now is they're redeeming themselves now that
Mm-hmm.
they're in old age and they're coming face to face with the end and what do you want to leave behind.
Yeah.
That's where things stand with those issues. But I'm eternally grateful for them being the examples. And even with my mom, I need to give her grace because again, considering the circumstances, I can understand where she might react that way. And we had a long discussion about this, probably about I want to say about a year or so before she passed away. And she carried that with her and she blocked a lot of things out because she recognized that it was traumatic. But I had to give her that grace to understand that, I didn't hate her for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the biggest gift, as she said, that I could give to her was forgiveness and understanding. And so, when I talk about the things that I've taken with, letting go, but it's also being forgiving and
Mm-hmm.
then understanding of certain situations that come about.
Yeah, that's a hard pill to swallow from a parent standpoint when they're internalizing all their own failures,
Hmm.
and yeah, so it's a lot. It's definitely a lot. So now you done moved, you got your baby boy, you got things rocking, and then you graduate, right? You graduate college, and then you go off into a career. So how much older is your son than your daughter?
5 years, five and
Okay.
a half. Mhm.
Okay. So
So
now
we
you
go off into starting our career. I went from Mississippi to Arizona,
okay.
and that's where I started my. I had been doing stuff in my career up to that point, but that's where I was sort of became official in
Mhm.
my
That's
job.
that's when you actually joined the MIB,
Right.
Men in Black, and
That's
that's
where
when you got
things
your black
started.
suit and your
Right.
black tie and everything, right?
Yeah, the forget me not. Yeah, there we go. So
Yeah.
we start that and I'm just trucking along. I'm working for this agency, first black woman to do so, first black archaeologist to do this, and all these things like that. And so that you get met with pushback. And
Sure.
this is in the early or the late 90s, and it had its own challenges. You're the only black woman in this town. I can remember being at a stoplight and this family had moved in from California. They're like, "Where's the black side of town?" I'm like, "Huh?"
You see it. I'm right here.
This it's about 20 of us in this town alone. And so they were like, "Really?" Whatever else. But yeah, like I can remember when I moved out there, this woman, she kept, she had seen us move in, and I didn't see her. She kept walking across the back yard area, and she's a black woman, and she was married to a white guy, and so I just remember why she keep walking back out there. She saw I was her, she was pregnant, and she's like, and I come outside, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And she's like, "I was hoping you would come out." She said, "I see another black woman out here, and I just have to meet you and everything else like that. And we're still friends to this day."
I'm
And
gonna
so
tell you, that's
it's
real.
amazing when you're living. And this is again, people think this is ancient history. This is in my lifetime where you got towns where there's not a lot of us out there.
I live in
It's
one.
happening.
We're the 1%. If you
Yeah,
pull up our town's website, guess who the family on it that represents us?
right, y'all.
We are. We are. And what's funny is we have some new neighbors that moved in, and
Hmm.
they're about 6 houses from our house.
Uh
So
huh.
our house sits right here. They sit on the corner, and I'm getting out my Jeep, and I'm like, hold on,
That's
I
a black
I I'm like,
man.
I don't know if they. I said I don't know if there's people that's moving them in or I said I gotta go see who this is. So
Mm-hmm.
I drive down there and the guy come out and I was like, "Welcome to the neighborhood." he, and he was like, "Oh," he was like, he knew me, but I didn't know him,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, "Man, welcome to the neighborhood, like, welcome to the neighborhood, because there's 100 houses in our community,
Mm-hmm.
and there's one, two, three, three families
Uh-huh.
in this community. He makes four, so it's four families in this 100 house community that
Mm-hmm.
so it's still real. People still do that. Like
It's still going on to this day, and so
absolutely. We want
being
to make sure we see people that look, you see some you know what I'm saying? I see people at the local grocery store up the street.
and get excited like, oh, one of us.
Yeah, I'm like, uh, welcome to the community.
Right.
Where do y'all live at? Like, man, it's funny.
Yeah.
It is
So
funny.
that was the biggest challenge, right? Is being in those areas, because not only you're trying to maintain your family unit, right? Your internal, but your
Hmm.
external, and
Hmm.
being in the community, but then also the career aspect. So it's all these different things that you're juggling, and then by then I'm like, I'm a pro at whatever we're gonna do. And so, she and I become friends, and when she had her daughter, I was there. She's actually my daughter's, other godmother. And so, it's just those dynamics are in place. Then you have the career, because, I'm the only Black person in the office. And I can
Yeah.
remember coming into the office where I had mud smeared on my computer. You know, I
Uh,
had the N word written on some things. I've had minors coming into the office like, we don't want to talk to that N word. And then I think by the time, and I realized I had some work to do too,
mhm,
um, as far
mhm,
as these folks have that limited mind view. They're stuck in their town, they're stuck in their city, and so they don't encounter a lot of us.
right.
And the onus was on me to be the de facto example of how actually your view of us is not correct, and this is the reality. And so by the time I left that town, those same miners that had come in and said, we don't want to work with that N word, where we're like, where's she going? We don't want to work with anyone else but her.
Mhm, mhm,
Same thing with working with Native American tribes. The tribes back east, they're there, but it's not as prevalent as out west. And so even working with them, and there's a lot of commonality as far as our treatment in this country. And so we were able to get along, whereas they wouldn't work with the lighter persuasion archaeologists. They're like, look, can she come to the reservation? Because we don't trust y'all. So right. And so so those things you cultivate over time, and you cultivate that relationship, and you work within those different community groups and understanding. And so I did a lot of that type of work, and I still do a lot of that to this day, working with sort of marginalized groups to help them understand what's happening, what resources are available, and so on and so forth. Um, it was a challenge to navigate all those things.
mhm,
And I didn't realize I was blazing the trail. And a lot of people that are trailblazers, they don't realize they're blazing the trail. They're just doing it.
right.
It's not intentionally going out there because I'm the first Black archaeologist to do da da da. No, I'm just doing it. And then
Mm,
when it gets pointed out to you, you're like, oh, for real? Dang, I didn't know that. Or that's amazing. Let me put that in my book.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're crossing frontiers and breaking barriers,
Right.
you know, and because you think that all the barriers in even where we are now in 2025, you have
Mm-hmm.
think that the barriers have been all the barriers have been
We are
trailblazed
not.
and they and everything. No, they're
There's so many
still
rooms we're not in. Mm-mm.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So now you're moving now. This is a crazy question, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna tell me no. But your son and your daughter, do they have the same father?
Yeah,
They do.
they did.
Ah, okay. So so How
So
did?
let me give you that because I can see the wheels turning in your head. So 5 years, right?
Uh-huh.
And,
How
and
did?
again, this was the first guy that I was ever with.
Okay.
Now, even though we weren't married, I still
Okay.
had a lot of traditional views.
Okay.
And in that, I was sort of the good girl, whatever else.
Hmm.
It's only by virtue of the fact that he just didn't do right, that I didn't get married. And so I was still, we had broken up and whatnot. And I still had some sort of latent feelings like, okay, I want to make sure. But I also, started getting out there in the dating field because, again, he was still in Mississippi. I had asked him to come and, be a family because I had a stable job, I had a house.
Hmm.
He could go to school and things like that, but he wasn't willing to leave Mississippi. That's all he knew all his life. That's his family there. They've been there since, they were slaves, right? That's how he was tied and locked in.
Hmm.
And so he was scared to do that. He later admitted it. He's like, I just couldn't imagine doing what you did. You went everywhere and took our kids with you. But he just wasn't there, even though he was 7 years older and, not really more mature, but still. So we get to that point and he comes out because he was still engaged, even though we weren't together. Like I said, we were co-parenting. So he came out to spend some time with our son on one of his breaks. And, I had one of those moments where I'm like, I want to make sure I'm over him. I'm starting to date.
Hmm.
We had a moment. And yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how my daughter got here. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely. So I just remember thinking, yeah, I'm definitely over him. This was not even that great. So let me go ahead and, try to date. And so the guy that I had started seeing, and this is where I talk about this. This is I'm not above holding myself accountable.
Hmm.
So even though that was going on, and yes, I determined that I was over him, and I can move on safely to someone else. This other person was there early on. And then, it broke my heart to have to tell him, no, this is not your child. But I knew. So someone are like, are you sure? Look, there was enough space in between where I
Hmm.
knew there was no possibility of this man being my daughter's father. And so that kind of broke my heart. And we're still friends to this day to have to tell him that, yeah, no, because he really wanted to have a kid. And, he got he went and joined the military afterwards and went over. They shipped him over to Saudi Arabia, and every day he wrote me, and he was just like whatever else, But it was just one of those things, and I'm like, that was the one sort of relationship where I screwed that up. Because again, it was still early on. You're filling each other out, whatever. Yeah,
Hmm.
we had
Hmm.
fooled around or whatever, but I wanted to make sure I was over this situation and not carrying those things over into the new one. And that was just my miscalculation of, the
Your
protection didn't work
emotions.
the way it was supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's that. But that's how my daughter got here. And, I made a determination, what, I'm stable. I have a house, I have a job, my son's here. I always wanted to have kids and I always wanted to have more than, just the one. I
Hmm.
thought I would like 3 or 4, but it just turned out I had two. And, I was just thinking, okay, you know what? I called him up. I says, hey, the test came back positive. He said, I guess ain't no crying, no sense of crying over spilled milk. Yeah. So that again, practical thinking, right? Practical thinking. And so, had our daughter and, just kind of went through life. Stayed there for 2 more years in Arizona. And then the hurricanes happened in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
So they put out a call out for anybody and everybody to come in to help out with those recovery efforts. And so I was just like, okay, I can move closer to my family. And then
Hmm.
their dad, just a few hours away. So they can, start really building up a relationship with him. And then, that was kind of how that came about.
Do they have a good relationship?
It's complex.
I get it. I get it.
It's
Because
complex.
at a certain age, I can determine if I want that relationship or not.
Right. And I think the onus was on him. Again, he even though he was older, he still had a lot of things that he needed to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And his priorities just weren't quite right. He was still engaged, he was still father, so I will give him that. I won't take that from him. When it came for the weekends and the summer times, he would get them. But I think it had gotten to a point, for instance, one summer, and I didn't call him every day or anything because I had my own, right? So some baby mamas would call him for everything. I didn't do that. But even the times that I did call, several of his girlfriends at the time had an issue with me calling. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that kind of, chaps my behind, is that why are you having issue with him having a relationship with his kids? There are some women that will stand in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
That will, well, you shouldn't be doing this because they feel like, oh, you still have feelings for the mom, or you have, something's going on. And that's not even the case at all. He's just having a relationship with his kids. And so, like, when he would come down, at the time I was living in New Orleans, look, I was having a good time. So he'd come down and hang out with the kids. All right, I'm gonna see y'all later. Have fun with the kids. I'll see you in a couple hours, or whatever else. But that created an insecurity to
Mm-hmm.
see that type of working relationship, co-parenting for the women that were in his life at the time. And so they kind of gave him an ultimatum. We had a big old argument about that. He said some things, and I said, one thing you need to understand is once you say some things, you can never take it back.
Right. Right.
And that shift right there was happening. The kids were starting to become aware, right, that some of the things that he was doing was, whenever he would get them, of course, pawn them off on,
His
his
grandparents.
mom, his
Yeah.
family, his
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend. And so they were starting to become aware of that, and they weren't comfortable with that. And one thing I did give my kids leeway to do is to speak your mind, be respectful, but don't hold that in,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to know, and I can't effectively parent you if I'm not understanding how you're feeling. That's a changeover from even when we were kids.
One
You
hundred percent.
child, you stay over there, whatever else. So
Right.
in that level of parenting, I was doing something different, and so they're starting to see it. They're starting to become aware of it. And then he met his now wife, and so that set up a dynamic there where they just weren't comfortable. If you have a person, and this is what I caution folks that are dating people with kids. If you're dating, for instance, a man with kids, you have to give those kids room and time to accept you,
Mm-hmm.
and also accept the changing conditions that their dad might be living in, or whatever is going on. You have to be understanding of it, but you cannot set yourself up to be the enemy of their mom,
Right. That's
right?
good advice.
You
That's real good.
can't set yourself up to do that, because that's going to determine whether or not you can succeed with that man, whether
Mm-hmm.
you have a relationship with those kids. And if you are of a mindset to be inclusive and accepting of him and his kids, you have to be also accepting of that mom. Not to say you got to be best friends, but you have to be respectful,
Right. There's a
right?
work has to have a working relationship.
You have to have a working relationship and
Yeah.
understand. And so a lot of men though will play you off of each other. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was his thing was, well, you don't have to talk to her, and you don't need to believe anything she says and everything else. So you can't really get the full breadth of what that man is either, right? If he's telling you, I'm the good man, and I was da 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 da, all you're hearing is him. And a lot of women fall into that category because they are the woman that's falling behind, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
believing everything he says. There are three sides to a story, right? His
Three.
truth, her truth, and somewhere in the middle is the
The
truth.
real truth. Yeah.
Right. And so when you go in with that mindset, oh, she just this, she's this, she's
Mm-hmm.
the, you
Mm-hmm.
can't develop a good working relationship and co-parenting situation. And that's kind of where things started to crumble, is that dynamic was set up by him, to where he ensured that happened. And now I can count on maybe, one hand the number of conversations that I actually had with her, and they weren't, good,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm particular about my kids. And
And you
so
should be.
say something sideways about them or something to them, I'm gonna pop off. I'm gonna
Oh,
take.
absolutely,
I'm
100%.
gonna say something. So
Yeah.
that's what happened there. Is that's where the complication is with their relationship, is that they started seeing him not standing up for them in that dynamic.
That's tough.
Yeah.
It's hard to recover from that from a child standpoint.
Right.
Um, it's hard that's a difficult place to be in. But I definitely just be praying for that, um, because that relationship is still important,
It
and
is.
and um, and it's all in timing. It's definitely a timing thing, and
And don't, I mean, not to say that they don't have a relationship with them. It's just one of
y-
those phases that they go through. It's a little strained
yeah,
because of decisions that he made. And, one thing I tell my kids is you have to get to the point to where you forgive them, not for him, but for you. And
and
you
as a
let
kid, that's hard to understand.
them. As young
People,
adults, because they're both
yeah,
young adults.
yeah. Is that me?
That's
Can you
me,
hear
because every time it does that, it kind of, gives
Okay.
a thumbs up.
Yeah, yeah, that trying to explain forgiveness to a child
Hmm.
who is coming into a purity of just why, it's like, but why? But why? But
Right.
why? But why? And so I can understand where they are, but you're a rock star mom though.
Well, I mean, and once our daughter graduated, I says, okay, you're officially blocked.
You
You
this
don't got
rock
to talk no more.
Hey, you're a rock star mom. So you navigate through this career. You are the first. You're crossing. You're breaking barriers. You are a trendsetter. You are a trailblazer. You are establishing protocol. You're out here being a super mom, showing up to the games. Hey, why didn't you send your kids to the boarding school though?
There was an opportunity for them to go. They said absolutely not. Because all their
Really?
lives, we would go back and go to events and things like that. But
Mhm.
I guess that's the difference between me and them because I had such instability. Um, it was okay for me to go because that
Mhm.
provided stability.
Ability, right?
Whereas if you're coming in from stability, it's hard to make that transition to be like, yeah, I think I want to go to this school and be away from my mom and my
Right.
brother and my sister. And yeah, some they could have gone because I actually sat on the board of the school, an alumni board. And they were, they were asked by the president of the school, who actually was a student there now, the new president. And they were like, no, we come to this campus every year of our lives. We do not want to come to this school. And we don't, and of course they grew up in the suburbs, right? So they had
Right.
friends from all different backgrounds. They were like, yeah, we don't like black people that much.
I ge-
You
I get
understand,
it. I
right?
get it.
Because
I
they're
get
like,
it.
we see y'all, no, this is too much. So they were like, yeah, they got their friends, they had their lives, and but they were asked, they were given the opportunity, but they were like, yeah, no, we ain't
You
about
did
that life.
you did pull the beta switch like they did with you. And
No, I couldn't send them for the summer. I couldn't do. They was like absolutely no. So they got a summer program. No, mom, we heard your story. You ain't tricking us like that.
they like, nah, mom trying to get she trying to send us down to that boarding school. We gonna
Right, but I
mm-mm.
didn't actually, and I would ask them just as a because if they had said yes, then I would have sent them. But I love my kids. Look, we're extremely close.
That's
And even with my son deciding to go into the military, that was
mm.
a hard thing because I'm like, I cry like a baby.
What
Shipping
branch?
off thing, huh?
What branch?
Navy.
That's smart choice.
You're right. So it was either that or Air Force. So
Air Force would have
that
been,
was a hard
yeah.
thing.
So
Yeah.
how long has he been in?
So when he graduated high school, we then moved. So we were in Texas at the time. We've lived all over the country.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
just to be aware. But we were in Texas at the time. We moved from Texas to Alabama. I took a position there. And he was in college. But he had seen some things because he was doing a rotation as an EMT, and he was like, "Yeah, I can't. I'm not about that life, mom. The things I saw to that body, yeah." So, but he took a gap year. Said you can take a gap year, you can figure it out. You got to get a job though,
Hmm.
and in that meantime, and so he did. And then yeah, I said at the end of the year we're gonna have a talk. You got a couple options: military, not the army,
Right.
um, you got trade school or something else. You got to get a job. And so he came and he's like, probably to the day before that the decision was supposed to come down, we supposed to sit down and talk. He says, Mom, I think I'm just going to go ahead and go into the military. And I'm like, okay. By then COVID was going on.
Mm.
And so we signed him up and everything. And this is the great thing about, working in certain circles and living in certain spheres. So we were signing him up for the military. And someone walks in the door and he's just staring at me. He's a high ranking, person. And he's just staring. And I'm sitting there filling out the paperwork and I keep looking at him. I'm like, okay, whatever. I didn't pay attention. So he walks up. He says my full government name. He says it, J. Rich. And I'm like, can I help you? And he's like, it's me. And I'm like, doesn't ring. He said, I got 2 words for you, Piney Woods. I says, okay. So he was a student there, same boarding school, same black boarding school. And then when he showed me the name, I was like, okay. So he was a younger classman from me. Uh-huh. And he was like, y'all don't even know who y'all talking to in y'all's presence, talking to the rest of the officers there. And it was like, well, who is she? Because she seems to know a whole lot about us, but we don't know about her. So she's reading through the paperwork. Yeah, no, he's not doing that. He's not doing that. And he's going to do this and he's going to do this. And they're like, who is she?
Wow.
And so he was like, y'all don't even know who y'all talking to. Put some respect on her name. If she says her son's not going to do it, he ain't going to do it.
Where did he land? I mean, got me all intrigued. Where did he land? Like, where did he land at in the Navy? Like, what is his job?
So he was put over that particular recruiting station, but he had a whole bunch of them that he was responsible for. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, Jay, I promise you, whatever's happened, I'm gonna make sure he's covered. Here's my number, here's whatever. So he was straight. But once they did that, they were like, oh. And it was like, they I guess someone pulled my information up and they were like, oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We can, it's like she outranks all of us. And I'm like, okay, we're not going to do that. But I'm his mom. And just understand, he needs to be taken care of. And so, one thing is when he was going, because his first orders were after he got out of school was to go to Japan.
Okay.
And my neighbor was an admiral at the time. And so he's like, yeah, okay, he's going over there. I know the captain over there on the ship he's on. And I says, okay, well, he's gone and I don't know where he is. Because this is his first time. We've been out of the country with them growing up. But his first time alone. And last time I had spoken to him, he's like, Mom, no one's here at the station to pick us up. Yada, yada, yada. And of course, my mom gear kicks in like, okay, where my son, he's in a foreign country. They only speak the same language. Who I need to call? I need to send out the National Guard. And so the neighbor's like, oh, I know the captain. Here's his number. Listen, I called him. Said, find my son. I'm in 24 hours.
He found your son.
Yeah. He said, and so my son called me, within a time frame. He's like, Mom, I was downstairs in the mess hall and the dang on captain comes in. And everybody's standing at attention. And he says, he calls my name. Mr. So-and-so, where you at? And so he stands up and, he's like, yeah, I'm here. He said, he walks up to him. He says, son, your mama called. He said, I'm afraid of her. You need to call her today. he said, and he's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, I was apologizing to him. He said, look, he said, you want a mom like that. He said, half these kids' parents don't know that they over here.
Man,
so, the fact that she called, he said, but ma'am, tell her, look, don't call me. Don't call me again. He said, look, I had to stand at attention and I was on the phone. I was on my own phone.
So your son lands into the what's his job? What is he doing in the Navy? What does he do? I mean, I get it.
Ship, yeah.
Right. All right.
They're stationed in San Diego. So
I was stationed in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
I was at yeah. That's all right. So and your baby girl is off doing big things where she's at doing what she's doing
Right.
in
So
the space that she's
um
in.
she graduated in 2 years ago, 2023. Yeah, so she is in her sophomore year in college. She's majoring in psychology, and she's always been. I think she saw her brother get in enough trouble when it comes to school. She was like, "Yeah, I ain't about that life. I ain't about to get the bricks swatted off me or whatever else." So she's always been sort of a straight shooter. She's been so easy going and just chill about so
Mhm.
many. But she's like me on steroids. She keeps me in check.
You know, I'm gonna say that we had a conversation offline, but I do have a son
Yeah,
that
Jerry. He's
I'm
trying to
just
set up
saying.
an arranged marriage.
I'm just saying. I do have a son that will be 20 this year. Got
Right.
he come from good stock. I mean,
Come on, good start.
I'm just saying. Hey, I ain't opposed to it. Um,
Right.
so so life your life has landed you where you are, and so you're in the process of writing a book, correct?
Correct. I am in the process of writing a book. I got a few things I need to finish up as far as some chapters, but my goal is to, release it. I said I was going to reclaim 420, and it's not the 420 that folks might think, but that is the actual day that my mom passed away.
Okay.
And so I said, I'm going to try to reclaim that because every year, the last couple of years, you get sad on anniversaries of people's passing. And so,
For sure.
I usually have a tough time adjusting to it and need some time to kind of work my way through it. And so I said, I'm going to go ahead and reclaim that for myself and just, put out there and tell her story in a way that, it's respectful, but it's also honest and telling people how to overcome certain situations and obstacles in their lives and how I've been able to do it and navigate it successfully.
Well, I haven't known you long, but I just I told you I rock with you because I just love your personality and you remind me of my cousin so much.
Mhm.
Like I could or I see you and I hear you and I'm like, dang, that's my cousin. And my wife, I'm telling you, my wife said the same thing. My wife really likes you too. And
Yeah, she's a peach. I like both of you. You're cool.
yeah, I'm glad that that we met, and definitely when you get your book out and things like that, you got to let me know so that we can advertise it and all that good stuff so that we can put it on. But in the meantime, y'all go follow her on TikTok. This is her page.
Right.
Go follow because she be dropping some gems, y'all. Like she is an amazing person, and she talks with so much wisdom and life experience, and she challenges the status quo, and she hears from a different perspective. So we were talking about some things, and she was her the way her brain processes information was like, but explain this a little bit more, and explain this a little bit more, and it
Mhm.
was like, oh, and so y'all, I'm telling y'all, if y'all get in spaces with her or get in a live on TikTok and you see her on, really, really take heed to what she's saying. And sometimes she's just laughing and joking, but she's dropping some gems and she's dropping some nuggets. And this book is going to be amazing when this book drops because I know just we giving you a cliff note version. I'm pretty sure if we started to unravel and dig in to a lot of the things that in her life, we would be on here for 5 or 6 hours. Um, and but what I want to do is give people just enough to know that you are doing some amazing things and that you are a phenomenal person. And I'm but I do have one last question for you.
Is it dating related?
It is not data related, but for those who see this and might want to shoot your shot, I'm just saying, you, she go put you in that gauntlet, and go see if you still standing at the end of it. It is not dating related. It is
Okay.
not. Um, this question is it's what is something that you didn't pay attention to while you were growing up that you had to learn the hard way?
Hmm. I think I would say maybe setting, well, I'm pretty good about setting boundaries, but there was matters of the heart,
Hmm.
right? Not to get
Hmm.
into the dating piece of it, but um, trusting individuals who were not coming in from a place of uh, being authentically themselves
Hmm.
and wanting the good for both of us versus just themselves. That's been a challenge for me when it comes to that sphere, and that's not just dating. That's just friends too. So I'm
Hmm.
usually a good judge of character when it comes to people, but there are some that are really good at masking and saying one thing but showing something else. And when they do that, sometimes it might take me a second to figure it out.
Hmm.
And I think that's just kind of the human condition in human relationships in general, where you're going to be, you have to discern between the people that are there for you. And I've given examples throughout this discussion of people that were there for me. And then people that are there to benefit off of you in some kind of way. And you have to learn to navigate that environment. If you have a empathetic spirit about you, if you have a just that type of energy where you want to be of service to folks. There are some players that are not as honest and genuine. So that's been the biggest challenge for me, just navigating that and seeing who's genuine and who's not, and who's for and who's not.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, I think that's probably it right there, is navigating what that means, and what that means for me on a day-to-day basis, my personal relationships with friends, family. I have a really close-knit group of friends that I've been friends with. I tend to keep my friends for years. I don't usually do those
Me
sort
too.
of 6 month or whatever friendships. When I say you're my friend, like when I give you my number, you locked in. Great.
Well, I
uh,
feel special.
you're right. You feel special. That's why I was sitting there looking at you sideways when you said, "Man, like you could have picked up the phone and called, sir, and said something instead of giving me the dad treatment." But seriously, that's the way it is, because once I let you in, you're family to me, and it's hard. We talked about this too, letting go.
Hmm.
It's one thing to let go of individuals that have passed on.
Hmm.
It's another thing to let go of people that are still living. And I've had to learn that, is just kind of, if they came in under false pretenses, recognizing it, calling it out, and then letting it stay where it is,
Hmm.
because it's not for me, and it's not. They're not going where I'm going. And my life has been a journey of sorts, and I'm always looking towards the horizon for the next thing that's coming up. And if those people aren't meant to be with me on that, next phase of whatever is happening, then you kind of got to let that be.
Yeah, I'm the same way. If I lock you in, we locked in. It
Right.
takes it takes a lot for me to not be your friend.
We family. We cousins.
Yeah, yeah,
Cousin.
yeah. Like now, like
Cousin.
hey, it takes a lot, but I do appreciate you pulling up and hanging out. You got anything else you want to say to the people?
No, thank you guys for listening. If you're out there listening and joining in on this discussion, Maurice is a great guy. His wife is a beautiful and amazing woman. I don't open up to everybody in this way, so he was able to convince me, and to have these discussions. So I appreciate his unique way of building relationships and camaraderie with folks. And he's a truly, truly genuine guy. He speaks relationships. I tend to stay away from those discussions, but he has a way of sort of matching things and putting things in place. And so I just want to give you your kudos for doing that and building relationships and telling people stories. So this is one platform that he uses. Like I mentioned, I'm coming out with my book here soon. I do a sort of a music thing on TikTok where I'm playing music or game nights, but I also need to get back into the habit of doing my podcast. It's called Sistar Speak, And, this is during the height of COVID where I would have different people come in and talk about just the day to day life,
Mm-hmm.
how they're navigating things, how they're navigating sickness or job or relationships or, kids, or balancing those things out and just having really frank conversations that aren't really, tailored to a certain demographic or anything else like that. It's for everybody. So,
Well, let me know when
thank
you want me to pull up, because you let me know when you want me to pull up. I'm down to be on your show.
Right. I appreciate you too. You are an amazing guy. Thank you.
I'm
You give
down.
women like me hope that there are still some good ones out there.
There's still a few of us out here. Well, look, with that being said, hey, I love you like a play cousin, and I'm out. Peace.
Peace.